Only one human species, Homo sapiens, the wise man, walks the earth today. Yet, that has not always been the case. During the last 2.5 million years, at least 8 different kinds of humans have lived on this planet. Each possessed its own traits: stature, skull shape, brain volume, way of life, and cultural level. Some of them stood upright long before we did, first grasped stone tools, mastered fire, and crossed entire continents. Others were our neighbors. They dwelled nearby, sometimes fought us, sometimes interbred, and eventually disappeared. This video offers a concise overview of every known human species that preceded us, where they emerged, how they looked, what set them apart, and why they became extinct. It is not speculation, but a synthesis of archaeology, genetics, and anthropology. We build a factual picture from fragments of bones, tools, and DNA, avoiding fantasy. Homo habilis is regarded as one of the earliest members of the genus Homo. He lived roughly from 2,400,000 to 1,400,000 years ago in what is now East and South Africa. Major finds come from Tanzania, Kenya, and South Africa. The nickname handyman was earned because he was the first to use simple stone implements systematically, sharp flakes struck from pebbles, employed to butcher animal carcasses, and perhaps for defense. Anatomically, Homo habilis occupied a middle position between Australopithecines and later human species. His height measured about 130 centimeters. Body mass ranged between 30 and 40 kilograms. He possessed long, ape-like arms and comparatively short legs. Brain capacity reached from 500 to 700 cubic centimeters, almost half that of modern humans. The face was flat, with pronounced brow ridges and larger teeth than ours. Despite a modest brain size, Homo habilis took a crucial step by deliberately making and using tools, changing food processing behavior. He probably lacked full speech, yet likely used gestures and simple vocal sounds. This stage marked the transition from primates to humans, capable of intentional action. With Homo habilis, the technological trajectory begins, eventually transforming the entire course of human evolution. Homo erectus arose roughly 1,900,000 years ago and became the first human species to leave Africa. His remains are scattered throughout Eurasia, from the Indonesian archipelago to Dmanisi in Georgia and Zhoukoudian in China. Such a distribution shows that this species could adapt to a wide range of climates and survive in unfamiliar environments. Compared with Homo habilis, erectus was taller, stronger, and closer to modern humans in body proportions. Height ranged from about 145 to 185 centimeters, while brain volume lay between 600 and 1,100 cubic centimeters, almost twice the capacity of the handyman. Erectus walked fully upright, possessed powerful legs suited for long treks, and shorter arms, signaling reduced dependence on trees. Homo erectus employed more advanced tools, including hand axes and blade-like implements. He almost certainly controlled fire. Layers of charcoal and charred bones at occupation sites testify to this skill. Fire provided warmth, protection, and cooked food, rendering his lifestyle far more resilient. The species endured an extraordinarily long time, around 1,500,000 years, making Homo erectus the longest-lived human species on record. Some populations survived until roughly 50,000 years ago, overlapping in time with Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. According to one hypothesis, erectus gave rise to both Neanderthals and Denisovans, laying the groundwork for later human evolution outside Africa. In 2003, archaeologists working in Liangbua Cave on the Indonesian island of Flores uncovered the remains of an extraordinary human. The individual stood about 106 centimeters tall, with a cranial volume of roughly 400 cubic centimeters, smaller than that of a chimpanzee. Yet the skeleton belonged to an adult. Thus, science met a new species, Homo floresiensis, nicknamed Hobbit, for its diminutive stature. The deposit containing the bones dates between approximately 60,000 and 100,000 years, and some traces may be even younger. Hence, Homo floresiensis lived contemporaneously with Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens. Despite a small brain, the hobbits fashioned stone tools, used fire, and apparently coordinated group hunts. The species exemplifies the island dwarfism effect. On isolated lands with limited resources, mammals often diminish in size over generations. The hobbits likely descended from a larger Homo erectus population, but gradually reduced height and mass to survive on Flores's meager supplies. They hunted dwarf stegodonts, miniature island elephants, and, judging by the evidence, were well adapted to the local environment. The same layers yield bones of giant monitor lizards, indicating harsh ecological pressures. Homo floresiensis disappeared around 50,000 years ago, soon after Homo sapiens arrived in the region. The exact cause remains uncertain. Perhaps an environmental upheaval or displacement by modern humans. Intriguingly, local legends still speak of small forest-dwelling people, adding mystery to the extinction of this remarkably distinct species. Homo naledi was discovered in the year 2013 inside the Rising Star Cave system near Johannesburg, South Africa. Scientists recovered more than 1,500 bones belonging to at least 15 individuals, adults, adolescents, and children. It is among the richest human burials ever found. Yet the real intrigue lies not in quantity, but in the bewildering mix of traits. In appearance, Homo naledi resembled very ancient hominins. He stood roughly 145 centimeters tall, weighed about 40 to 50 kilograms, and possessed a small brain measuring only 465 to 610 cubic centimeters, significantly less even than Homo habilis. His long curved fingers, primitive shoulders, and Australopithecine-like pelvis suited tree climbing, although he walked fully upright. The greatest surprise concerned age. Researchers first assumed Naledi lived millions of years ago, but radiometric tests revealed an age near 250,000 years. Thus, he existed alongside early Homo sapiens in Africa. How could a species with such a modest brain and archaic anatomy survive and share territory with more advanced humans? Another puzzle is the deposition of remains. Bones were found in a deep, hard-to-reach chamber, lacking predator marks or water damage, suggesting Homo naledi deliberately placed the dead there, practicing ritual burial. If true, this is conscious behavior, despite extremely limited brain size. Homo naledi therefore challenges the standard rule that a bigger brain equals more complex culture. His story shows that human forms could evolve in parallel, with varying levels of cognition and adaptation. He remains one of the most surprising and least understood branches of our lineage. Homo sapiens arose roughly 300,000 years ago in Africa at first merely one among several contemporary human species. Yet Sapiens eventually spread across the entire globe and is the sole Homo representative alive today. From the outset, Homo sapiens differed, not only anatomically, but behaviorally. His skull is high with a rounded occiput. Brain volume is about 1,350 cubic centimeters, equal to Neanderthal size, yet differently organized. He possessed advanced speech, abstract thinking, planning ability, symbolism, and creativity. The earliest sapiens began leaving Africa approximately 100,000 years ago. They swiftly colonized new lands, from the Near East and Europe to Southeast Asia and Australia. Along the way, they met other species, Neanderthals, Denisovans, possibly the Flores and Luzon humans. Sometimes conflict arose, sometimes interbreeding. Traces of these encounters remain in our DNA. The central advantage of Homo sapiens was flexibility in diet, technology, and social networks. He could adapt to varied environments, build expansive communities, foster trade, and transmit knowledge through speech and teaching. This universality gave him the edge over more specialized humans. By the 10th millennium of BCE, every other human species had vanished. Definitive causes remain uncertain, likely a combination of climate change, competition, disease, and assimilation. The result is clear. Homo sapiens alone endured. Today, he embodies humanity, yet his story is no solitary path. It is the closing line of a long chapter written by many species, each leaving a mark in our bones, our genes, and our behavior. Homo neanderthalensis inhabited Europe and Western Asia, roughly from 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. This species was among the best adapted humans to cold climates. Neanderthals lived in glacial forests, steppes, and caves, hunted large animals such as bison, mammoths, and woolly rhinoceroses, and learned to survive where mistakes were fatal. Their build was massive: a stocky trunk, short limbs, and a powerful rib cage minimized heat loss and conserved energy. The Neanderthal brain was even slightly larger than that of Homo sapiens, averaging between 1,450 and 1,600 cubic centimeters. The face projected forward, the nose was broad, and the brow ridges were strongly developed. Neanderthals manufactured sophisticated Mousterian stone tools, mastered fire, built shelters, and in some cases tended the sick and buried the dead. Archaeological sites reveal tooth and bone ornaments, ochre pigments, and occasionally simple symbols on cave walls, all suggesting a budding sense of culture and ritual. Between 60,000 and 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals encountered Homo sapiens expanding out of Africa. Encounters ranged from peaceful to hostile, yet the crucial outcome was interbreeding. Today, most people outside Africa possess between 1% and 2% Neanderthal DNA, proving the species did not vanish without a trace. The reasons for their physical disappearance around 40,000 years ago remain debated, but their genetic imprint endures forever. Denisovans form one of the most enigmatic branches of the genus Homo. Their remains were first identified in Denisova Cave in the Altai region of southern Siberia in the year 2010. Researchers recovered not a skull or complete skeleton, but merely a finger bone, several teeth, and bone fragments. From those pieces, however, ancient DNA was extracted, revealing a previously unknown human species. Denisovans lived between roughly 300,000 and about 50,000 years ago. Genetic evidence shows they were related to Neanderthals, yet formed a separate lineage. Their DNA differs both from Neanderthal DNA and from ours. Among certain modern populations, especially Melanesians, Papuans, and Aboriginal Australians, up to 5% of genetic material derives from Denisovans, indicating ancient interbreeding. Particularly striking is the bone of a hybrid girl, whose mother was Neanderthal and father Denisovan, direct proof that the two species not only met but formed families. Denisovans apparently ranged across a vast territory, from Siberia to Southeast Asia. Tibetans, for instance, possess a gene aiding high-altitude survival that also came from Denisovans. The challenge is the absence of a complete skull or skeleton, leaving appearance, culture, and daily life largely unknown. All information rests on DNA and archaeological strata containing their bones. Denisovans thus remain invisible people of human history. We know they existed, yet hardly know what they looked like. Even so, their faint trace is vital for grasping our shared past. Homo luzonensis is among the most recently identified human species. Its remains were unearthed in the year 2019 in Callao Cave on the Philippine island of Luzon. Researchers retrieved several teeth, fragments of finger bones, foot bones, and a femur belonging to at least 3 individuals. The anatomy of these bones proved so unusual that scientists concluded they represented an entirely separate species, previously unknown to science. The fossils date to roughly between 50 and 70,000 years ago, meaning Homo luzonensis lived at the same time as Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo floresiensis. The species was small, probably no taller than 120 centimeters. Its skeleton combined primitive and advanced traits, tiny, distinctively shaped teeth, and finger and foot bones, resembling much older hominins, suggesting adept tree climbing. Like the hobbits of Flores, Homo luzonensis likely descended from earlier migrants, probably Homo erectus, and underwent island isolation. The limited resources of Luzon favored reduced body size and the partial loss of progressive features as adaptations to the local ecosystem. Knowledge of Homo luzonensis culture is minimal. No tools or dwelling traces have been recovered so far, though indirect signs hint at possible fire use and hunting of native fauna. The mere presence of ancient humans on an island separated by deep water implies that their ancestors crossed seas, perhaps on rafts or simple boats, an impressive feat for such an early stage of evolution. Homo luzonensis offers further proof that human evolution was not linear, but consisted of numerous parallel paths. Some lines ended in dead ends, some vanished without trace, and others, like luzonensis, surface only now, tens of thousands of years later, reminding us how little we truly know about our origins. At present, Homo sapiens is the sole surviving member of the genus Homo. All other documented human species have vanished. These include Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, Homo luzonensis, and Homo naledi. The last of them disappeared roughly between 40 and 50,000 years ago. The ultimate causes of the other species' extinction remain unresolved. In many cases, they were likely displaced or absorbed by Homo sapiens. Interbreeding is well documented. Neanderthals and Denisovans left genetic traces in modern humans, and in some populations, up to 5% of DNA derives from these archaic people. Human evolution did not follow a straight ladder. Different species coexisted simultaneously, often on the same landscapes. Current archaeological and paleogenetic evidence reveals a branching tree of parallel and intersecting lines, some of which ended before reaching the present. Modern humans arose in Africa about 300,000 years ago and gradually spread to every continent. By the end of the last glacial period, about 10,000 years BCE, the other human species had disappeared. Thus, Homo sapiens remains the lone representative whose existence continues. The extinction of the rest underscores that humanity's story is a complex, branching system rather than a single path. Why do you look the way you do? Why is your nose shaped like that? Your skin, that particular shade, and your hair, that specific texture. None of this is a coincidence. It's the result of millions of years of evolution, interbreeding between species, mutations, and nature's errors that became fixed in your DNA. Within you live traces of extinct humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Cro-magnons. Some of your features are useful, others are useless, and some might even make your life harder. But all of them are heritage, and you have no idea how deeply rooted it is inside you. Watch till the end, and you'll learn why your face is a revelation from prehistory, and which hidden genes are controlling you right now. When you look at your face in the mirror, you're not just seeing a modern human. Some of your features aren't entirely yours. They're tens of thousands of years older. You may have inherited them from Homo neanderthalensis, a broad nasal bridge, pronounced brow ridges, a strong lower jaw, a short chin, deep-set eye sockets, a heavy forehead. All of these are classic traits of the Neanderthal skull. You might not have all of them at once, but some still appear in people all over the world. When Neanderthals left Africa and settled in Europe, they adapted to the harsh climate. Their skulls were larger, their facial bones thicker. They needed to warm the air they breathed, protect their faces from the cold, and retain heat. That's why they had enlarged nasal cavities and a prominent frontal ridge. These weren't just anatomical quirks. They were reflections of survival conditions. And when Homo sapiens began to interbreed with Neanderthals, those traits entered our gene pool. You might have a narrow chin and a broad jaw, a typical blend of modern and Neanderthal features. Some people still carry these traits in a pure form. For example, a prominent sloping forehead or wide nostrils, ancient adaptations that are no longer necessary, but remain. Even cheekbone shape can be inherited. Neanderthals had forward-projecting zygomatic bones, and some modern people still have facial structures that give them a heavy look. Interestingly, genetic studies confirm that Europeans and Asians carry on average between 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. In some regions, the percentage is even higher. That means the likelihood that you carry at least one Neanderthal feature on your face is very high. And it's not just about appearance. These genes can influence bone structure, nose shape, and even your bite. It's possible that your dental problems are echoes of a prehistoric past. So next time you look in the mirror, remember, in that face lives someone who once walked through a glacial forest 40,000 years ago, and you probably had no idea how much of you comes not from modern life, but from those who disappeared, leaving behind their signature written in your bones. The earliest humans living in Africa had dark skin, rich in melanin. It was a shield against the scorching sun, protecting folate in the blood, preventing sunburn, and reducing the risk of skin cancer. This level of pigmentation was perfectly suited for life under the equatorial sun. But when part of the population migrated northward, everything changed. There was less sunlight, and dark skin became a disadvantage. It blocked ultraviolet rays too well, leading to a deficiency in vitamin D. Nature's response: mutations that lighten the skin. These mutations were preserved in those who survived, and now most people in Europe and Northern Asia descend from those whose skin lost pigment. Here's the first effect. Light skin in modern humans isn't just paler. It's thinner, more sensitive, more prone to sunburn, and less effective at blocking UV radiation. Many people of European descent have skin that reddens easily, is prone to rosacea, and ages faster in the sun. This is a direct result of a weakened melanin barrier, advantageous in foggy climates and short daylight hours, but leaving us vulnerable today. Among Asian populations, the skin also became lighter, but developed different traits. It became denser with more stable pigmentation. This was an adaptation to a temperate climate, neither hot nor dark. Such skin retains moisture better and ages more slowly, but is often prone to hyperpigmentation and breakouts, especially during climate shifts. In African populations, the skin retained its dense structure and melanin richness, which offers resistance to sunlight but hinders vitamin D synthesis when moving north. Many descendants experience chronic vitamin D deficiency and related issues: bone weakness, fatigue, hormonal imbalances. If you have mixed ancestry, your skin may behave unpredictably. For example, oiliness, characteristic of equatorial populations, might combine with thinness and paleness inherited from northern ancestors. Or your skin might appear dark, but still accumulate vitamin D deficiency. Or it might seem dense, but burn easily. This isn't a cosmetic flaw. It's a conflict of ancient adaptations. Your skin today isn't your skin. It's a collage of genes that survived in different corners of the world. And every pimple, burn, or peeling patch isn't a mistake. It's a reminder. Your appearance is the product of thousands of years of survival, compromise, and migration. For ancient humans, especially Neanderthals, the face wasn't just a surface, but a tool. Their skulls were shaped not by aesthetics, but by necessity. Constant chewing of tough food, using teeth as tools, injuries from fights, falls, and hunting. This pressure shaped their anatomy. Prominent brow ridges, thick forehead bones, powerful jaws, and wide nasal passages. The face was their point of contact with reality. As living conditions changed, so did the skull, but not instantly. Many modern people inherited traits that once saved lives, but now cause problems. For example, some men still have prominent brow ridges, not as a sign of strength, but as a genetic echo. A shortened facial region can lead to overcrowded teeth, but that same feature makes the face appear softer compared to ancient ancestors. One of the least noticeable, yet most ancient inheritances is the ratio of cheekbone width to face length. In Neanderthals, this allowed the head to remain stable under heavy strain and gave the face an angular, primitive look. This ratio still exists in some people today and even contributes to ethnic identity. Even the structure of the eye sockets tells a story. Neanderthals had deep-set eyes, protecting them from bright light and injury. This trait still appears today. especially in people with northern lineage. A flat nasal bridge and short nose might be inherited from ancestors who survived in extreme cold. What's especially interesting is that the brain began evolving faster than the skull could adapt. As a result, new skull shapes emerged: higher foreheads, asymmetry, and unusual curves. This isn't a flaw, but an adaptation. The skull had to evolve rapidly to accommodate an increasingly complex brain. So, if you've ever thought you have a weird forehead, a heavy gaze, or a bad bite, it's not a mistake. These are imprints of survival, of evolutionary pressure, of environments where your ancestors fought, ate, froze, and endured. All of that is still visible in the shape of your face. Your hair carries far more meaning than just its color or style. Its structure, thickness, and shape are direct inheritances from the environments in which your ancestors lived. If you have straight, thick, and coarse hair, it's not just genetics, but a mark of adaptation to cold climates. Such hair lies flatter against the scalp, creating added insulation and retaining warmth. Neanderthals exhibited this kind of hair structure: compact, heavy, slow-growing, which helped conserve energy in frigid conditions. Curly, springy hair represents a different kind of adaptation. It better protects the head from overheating and sun exposure. The spiral shape creates an air buffer and disperses heat. This type of hair is most common among descendants of early humans from Africa. It's not a fashion, it's an evolutionary solution. Now to the less obvious. Thin, sparse hair is an inherited compromise. In a time when regulating body temperature was more critical than aesthetics, some ancestors began to lose dense body hair, but not uniformly. Some lost it from the head, others from the body. That's how modern variations arose. Male baldness, low hairlines, a tendency to lose hair. It's not a defect, but the result of a complex process. When thick coverage became unnecessary, the body reallocated resources. Hair color is another ancient marker. Lighter shades, including red, appeared more often in areas with low solar activity. Reduced melanin levels were compensated by better vitamin D synthesis. Red hair and pale skin are strongly associated with Neanderthal ancestry. The MC1R gene, responsible for red pigment, came from them. Carriers of this gene are often more sensitive to pain and have a higher risk of sunburn. Yet another case of an ancient adaptation causing modern vulnerability. If you've noticed uneven hair growth, early graying, or brittleness, it's not just a quirk. It's the imprint of a long transition from dense fur to partial baldness. Hair is an evolutionary chronicle that doesn't need words. It shows who your ancestors were, where they lived, and how they survived their climate. The shape of your skull isn't random and has nothing to do with fashion. It's an archive of adaptations shaped by climate, food, breathing, and even the ways your ancestors communicated. In Homo sapiens, the skull became more rounded and taller, the forehead vertical, the jaw less pronounced. Why? Because food became softer, tools replaced teeth, and speech, the main survival tool, required more space for the frontal cortex. Now compare that to Neanderthals. Their foreheads sloped back, brow ridges were massive, jaws were strong. They needed more power for chewing and more protection for the face against impacts and cold. But these aren't just museum relics. Parts of these features still remain in us. If you have a prominent occiput, a strong chin, a low forehead, or a wide nose, These are echoes of the Ice Age, where only those who could take a hit and tear through sinewy meat survived. Some facial features are linked not to beauty, but to ventilation and air warming. Wide nasal passages were a response to cold climates, where air needed to be warmed before entering the lungs. In contrast, descendants of tropical populations tend to have narrower noses, which help cool and humidify air. Even the size of the eye sockets isn't accidental. Neanderthals had larger sockets, necessary for survival in dimly lit caves in long winters. If your eyes are deep set, that's not a feature. It's a remnant of an ancient mechanism for coping with low light. The shape of your head and jaw is also shaped by diet changes. As food became soft and cooked, the bones changed. Less chewing meant less bone growth. That's why modern people often deal with crowded teeth and bite issues. The skull shrank faster than the jaw, and now there's less space for teeth. All of this isn't just anthropology. It's a mirror. You might look in it every day without realizing that you're not just seeing yourself, but also the ancient world from which your bones, breath, voice, and face emerged. Teeth are not just bones. They are evolutionary archives. When scientists study the teeth of ancient people, they gain insight into diet, lifestyle, stress levels, disease, and even age at death. And the condition of your teeth today is largely determined by how your distant ancestors lived. Neanderthals and other archaic humans had massive jaws with wide arches and large gaps between teeth. They needed this because their food didn't require chewing. It needed to be crushed and torn apart. Raw meat, sinew, roots, bone marrow. This was not soft cuisine. To survive, they needed extremely strong jaw structures. So they had powerful molars, thick enamel, and large pulp chambers. And no crowding. Their teeth were spaced well, distributing force efficiently. Things began to change with Homo sapiens, especially with the rise of agriculture. People started eating cooked, ground, warm food. Gradually, the jaw shrank because less chewing was required. But teeth, encoded by the old evolutionary blueprint, remained large. The result: crowding, malocclusion, wisdom teeth with no space. You visit the orthodontist because your mouth is no longer adapted to the old tooth size. Interestingly, baby teeth in ancient people also emerged later. Today, children's teeth erupt early, possibly due to changes in diet and hormones. But the basic plan, 20 baby teeth, 32 permanent ones, is inherited from a time when human life was completely different. Even toothaches aren't random. They result from a mismatch between genetic heritage and modern environment. Our ancestors rarely had cavities. Streptococcus mutans, the bacterium that causes them, spread widely only after sugar became common. But enamel, tubule structure, and inflammation responses haven't changed. Your tooth hurts not because it's weak, but because it's made for a different world. So if you've got bite problems, crowded wisdom teeth, but can still crack nuts or open bottles with your teeth, know that you're carrying in your mouth a memory of those who lived tens of thousands of years ago. Your dental problems might also be echoes of a prehistoric past. Neanderthals had brains that were not smaller, but often larger in volume than those of Homo sapiens, averaging around 1,500 to 1,600 cubic centimeters. But the distribution of that volume was different. Their occipital lobe responsible for vision, and the sensory motor areas were especially developed. This matched their way of life. They lived in environments where visual acuity, coordination, manual work, and instant reactions were crucial. Moreover, their daily lives didn't require abstract thinking, relying more on skills, strength, and repetitive actions. As civilization progressed, these parameters became less of a priority. However, some modern humans retain inherited neuroanatomical traits that influence behavior. For example, a tendency toward practical thinking, focus on detail, mechanical memory, and repetition. This is neither good nor bad. It's a form of cognitive specialization, the same kind that was useful in an Ice Age forest and now shows up as a love for hands-on work, craftsmanship, tactile learning, and visual instruction. Studies show that up to 60% of the Eurasian population inherited certain genes that affect the formation of dopamine receptors. This may increase anxiety, heighten stress response, and reduce cognitive flexibility. But those same traits, endurance, persistence, and concentration, were critically important in the past. That's why they still persist today. You may not question why you find it hard to switch tasks, or why you understand diagrams more easily than reading instructions. But this may be an echo of an ancient brain that, for millions of years, didn't need theory. It needed precise action. And although today you sit at a computer, your way of thinking may still be shaped by a glacial reality. You might think that mental disorders are a modern problem, caused by stress, technology, or information overload. But in reality, many of these conditions have deep roots in prehistoric times. We inherited not only physical traits from Neanderthals and other ancient species, but also genes linked to brain neurochemistry, emotional regulation, and susceptibility to mental disorders. These mutations arose in environments where high anxiety, hypersensitivity, or heightened threat response were adaptive. They helped people survive. For example, scientists have discovered that certain variants of the SLC6A4 gene, which controls serotonin transport, were passed to us from Neanderthals. These are linked to lower stress resilience, a predisposition to depression, and heightened emotional reactions. In an era when danger required instant reaction, this environmental sensitivity was an advantage. But in the modern world, with its constant noise, social pressure, and competition, those same traits can become sources of suffering. Neanderthals also had gene variants affecting circadian rhythms, the body's internal clock. Some modern humans inherited these forms and are now more prone to sleep disorders, seasonal depression, and difficulty adapting to shifts between night and day. In the Ice Age, where night could last for weeks, such adaptations were normal. Today, they may manifest as chronic insomnia or disrupted biorhythms. Research has also shown that Neanderthal genes play a role in forming the autistic spectrum. Specifically, traits like altered sensory processing, repetitive behavior, and weak social intuition. All of this could have been useful in hunting, manual labor, and intense task focus, but becomes a disadvantage in a world where communication and social flexibility are crucial. Moreover, studies from the 2020s revealed a link between Neanderthal DNA variants and predisposition to schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. This doesn't mean ancient humans were mentally ill in the modern sense, but their brains worked differently, with other priorities neurotransmitter balances, and environmental responses. Today, this may appear as mood instability, attention problems, or increased impulsivity. Finally, we must consider the role of dopamine. Some dopamine receptor types inherited from ancient humans influence motivation, susceptibility to addiction, and novelty-seeking behavior. In the hunter's world, this helped locate new food sources and resources. In the modern world, it may lead to overeating, internet addiction, compulsive gaming, or substance abuse. This is why mental traits aren't flaws. They're versions of evolutionary adaptation. What once helped someone survive might now get in the way of daily life. Your anxiety, sensitivity, or social withdrawal may not be weakness, but echoes of a world where a single noise could mean death. Understanding this helps not only to accept yourself, but to recognize the imprint of thousands of years of survival. The immune system of modern humans is not a product of civilization. It is a relic of ancient wars, once fought by Neanderthals, Denisovans, and their peers. Everything that entered their bodies, bacteria, viruses, parasites, rotting food, wounds from hunting, demanded immediate and powerful immune responses. The ones who survived were those whose immune systems were the most aggressive and fast-reacting. As a result, we inherited not only protection, but also a tendency toward dangerous hyperreactivity. Fragments of ancient genetic code responsible for recognizing and destroying pathogens still live in us. For example, outside of Africa, many people carry Neanderthal versions of the TLR, 6TLR, 1TLR, 10 gene cluster, which enhances immune response to bacteria. In cave environments full of injuries, this saved lives. Today, it increases the risk of allergies and autoimmune diseases. What once defended us now attacks our own cells. Another example is the STAT2 gene from the Denisovans. It boosted resistance to viruses, particularly RNA viruses, dangerous in the Asian climate. Modern carriers of this gene handle some infections better, but may also be more prone to inflammatory reactions and immune dysregulation. Neanderthals also passed down a stronger OAS1 gene, which triggers faster antiviral responses. It still helps launch defenses against viruses, but also increases the likelihood of cytokine storms, dangerous overreactions of the immune system. According to geneticists, this may affect how some people respond to severe viral diseases, including COVID-19. Even the risk of type 2 diabetes partly traces back to prehistory. Some inherited genes regulating metabolism once helped store fat and survive famine. But in a world of abundance, they now raise the risk of metabolic disorders and chronic inflammation. Immunity isn't just protection. It's a compromise between survival and self-destruction. Inside, you still lives an ancient hunter whose body was ready for anything. Bear claw wounds, insect bites, or spoiled meat. That hunter still fights for you. But in a world where the enemies have changed and the weapons too often turn inward, many modern mental disorders are not malfunctions. They are side effects of evolution. Our brain was shaped under conditions that no longer exist. The shift in those conditions turned some ancient traits into harmful ones, even though they once helped us survive. Take anxiety, for example. In the past, it saved lives. A person who noticed danger faster was less likely to become prey. Their children inherited that vigilance. Today, the same traits lead to chronic stress, insomnia, and panic attacks. Fear hasn't disappeared. It just no longer knows what to react to. There's no saber-toothed tiger, but there's a boss, a loan, and the news. Depression is another example. Scientists suggest that the tendency toward depressive states may have been a form of energy conservation. If a person was sick, injured, or starving, detachment and lethargy helped preserve strength. Today, that same reaction often activates without a real cause, because the brain doesn't distinguish physical threats from social ones. Some genetic variants linked to mental disorders came from Neanderthals. For instance, a mutation that increases pain sensitivity is also associated with a higher risk of depression. This doesn't mean Neanderthals were prone to depression, but their nervous systems worked differently, and parts of those systems are now built into our brains. Modern carriers of such genes more often report headaches, migraines, and chronic tension. Seasonal affective disorder is another ancient mechanism. It is especially common among people with northern ancestry. In an era when life depended on light, decreased winter activity conserved energy. Today, it turns into apathy and a reluctance to get out of bed. The same goes for insomnia. In the past, staying alert at night helped protect the camp. Now, it causes exhaustion and chronic fatigue. Even paranoia may have evolutionary roots. In small groups, too much trust was dangerous. Distrustful individuals survived longer. Today, this shows up as thought disorders and anxious suspicion. What used to be useful caution has become a debilitating symptom. We are not built for silence, peace, or stability. Our brain is a threat detection machine. And when it finds no threats, it creates them. That's why the ancient genes that once gave us a chance to survive now make us vulnerable. When people say, "I'm just like this because I was born this way," they rarely consider how far back that "this" truly goes. But your nose, skin color, height, tendency toward allergies, or how you handle stress, all of it is the outcome of millions of years of selection, randomness, and survival. Behind every one of your traits is a chain of ancestors, each passing down a small part of themselves. The shape of your skull is not just anatomy, it's the mark of an evolutionary battle between brain and jaw. The higher the forehead, the more space for the frontal cortex, the region for planning and self-control. But at some point, the jaw shrank and the brain grew, leading to round skulls that differ from the elongated shapes of Neanderthals. Your skin is the result of adaptation to sunlight. If your ancestors lived near the equator, it is denser, darker, richer in melanin. If they lived in the far north, it is lighter, to produce vitamin D in low light conditions. Today, you can move anywhere, but your skin still remembers the region where your ancestors survived. Your nose is not just a facial feature. It's a filter, a heater, and a humidifier. A humid climate produced flat, wide noses. Cold and dry air led to narrow, long ones. Every contour of your face is not about beauty. It's nature's engineering for specific environments. Even your hair isn't about fashion. It's biology. Curly hair disperses heat in hot climates. Straight hair retains warmth longer in cold ones. Skin oiliness, blood clotting, bone density, pain sensitivity. You didn't choose any of it, but you carry within you millions of decisions made long before you were born. Your body, your personality, even your weaknesses. They're not individual glitches. They're parts of a system that's been working for a long time. Some parts are outdated, Others still matter, but not one of them appeared by accident. Everything has a root. You're not just a set of genes. You're an archive. Inside, you live Cro-magnons, Neanderthals, Denisovans, hunters, gatherers, survivors of famine, frost, injuries, and disease. The way you look and feel today is the result of thousands of years of struggle. It's not a flaw. It's evolution. And maybe when you look in the mirror, you don't just see yourself. You see everyone who made you possible. Have you ever wondered why some people have blue eyes? Why they are less common than brown ones? It's not just about aesthetics. It's the trace of an ancient mutation that changed the appearance of humankind. Blue eyes emerged very recently in evolutionary terms. Not millions, but only a few thousand years ago. And this discovery has overturned scientists' understanding of genetics, migration, and human adaptation. Around 10,000 years ago, somewhere near the Black Sea, a rare genetic mutation occurred in a single individual. One specific gene in their DNA was switched off, and that triggered a chain reaction. This gene, known as OCA2, normally controls melanin production, the pigment responsible for skin, eye, and hair color. When OCA2 functions properly, it leads to brown or dark-colored eyes. But in this individual, the gene was disrupted. It stopped suppressing a neighboring piece of DNA called HERC2. HERC2 started interfering with OCA2's function, causing melanin production in the iris to plummet. As a result, this person's eyes became light, not gray, not green, but distinctly blue. This was the first known human in history with blue eyes. A single genetic glitch that could have gone unnoticed suddenly began to spread. Scientifically, this event is remarkable. All people alive today with blue eyes, from Scandinavians to some Middle Eastern populations, share this exact same mutation. That means every blue-eyed person on Earth descends from one single ancestor who first carried this unique change. Not from a group, not from regional variation, but from a single human. This doesn't mean that Homo sapiens never had blue eyes before. They just weren't common, and this particular mutation became dominant. Scientists believe that the carrier of the mutation might have had a selective advantage, for example, being more attractive to potential mates. This led to the spread of blue eyes, especially in Northern and Eastern Europe, where they are most prevalent today. From an evolutionary standpoint, a mutation that reduces melanin production should have been a disadvantage. Blue eyes are more sensitive to sunlight, offer less UV protection, and potentially increase the risk of damage. Yet instead of vanishing, blue eyes spread rapidly. So, why did that happen? One major hypothesis is sexual selection. People with unusual traits often stand out, especially in small, early human populations. When the number of potential partners was limited, a unique feature like light-colored eyes could attract attention. Blue eyes may have been perceived as rare, or as a sign of health or individuality. This increased the chances of reproduction and passing the trait on. Another theory involves adaptation to northern climates. In regions with limited sunlight, where blue-eyed populations emerged, reduced melanin could help the body produce more vitamin D. Less pigment meant more light penetration, which supported vitamin synthesis. This gave blue-eyed individuals a survival edge in environments with low UV exposure. In the end, a random mutation became fixed in the human gene pool. Today, hundreds of millions of people around the world have blue eyes. But if you trace it back, it all started with a single glitch, in a single body, in a single place on the map. It's often assumed that blue eyes are a trait unique to Homo sapiens, but that's not entirely accurate. While the most well-known blue eye mutation appeared around 10,000 years ago, this doesn't mean other human species, like Neanderthals, couldn't have had light eyes. DNA analysis of Neanderthal remains revealed some fascinating insights. Some individuals likely had fair skin and possibly light hair and eyes, particularly those from European and Siberian populations adapted to northern climates. In areas with less sunlight, pigment production decreases, a biological adaptation. So, it's plausible that blue or green eyes existed among Neanderthals long before the modern blue-eyed gene spread among Homo sapiens. However, in ancient humans, blue eyes may have emerged for different reasons. In Neanderthals, they could have been caused by entirely separate mutations, unrelated to the specific one found in modern people. This means their blue eyes could have evolved through a different genetic pathway, a case of convergent evolution, where similar traits appear in different species independently. This suggests blue eyes aren't an exclusive trait of Homo sapiens. Instead, they reflect a complex evolutionary process that may have occurred in various places across multiple human species. Blue eyes aren't a sign of civilization or progress. They're simply one of many adaptations born from the environment. Many assume red hair is a modern trait that arose in Homo sapiens, but DNA studies show that the gene responsible for red hair was also present in Neanderthals. In some individuals, particularly from Western Europe, scientists discovered mutations in the MC1R gene that reduced melanin production, the pigment that determines skin and hair color. As a result, Neanderthals likely had fair skin and possibly red hair. However, it's important to note that this was not the same gene variant found in modern red-haired humans. The MC1R mutations in Homo sapiens and Neanderthals appeared independently. Once again, an example of convergent evolution, where nature arrives at similar outcomes through different genetic paths. In modern humans, red hair is most common among people of Northern European descent, in Ireland, Scotland, and Scandinavia. And that mutation emerged later, after the Neanderthals had gone extinct. So, we can say that red hair appeared twice in human history. First among Neanderthals, then again in Homo sapiens. This further proves that many physical traits aren't unique or random, but predictable responses to environmental pressures. Light skin and hair help the body produce vitamin D in low sunlight, giving these traits an evolutionary advantage in northern climates and causing them to evolve independently in separate populations. When archaeologists compare Neanderthal skeletons to those of Homo sapiens, one difference stands out. Our bones are thinner and lighter. Neanderthals had massive femurs, wide shoulder joints, and thick wrists. Their skeletons seemed built for brute force, as if their daily survival depended on raw physical power. They lived in extreme conditions and endured them through strength alone. Homo sapiens took a different route. Our ancestors began using tools and technology instead of sheer muscle. Rather than dragging animal carcasses by hand, they built sleds or harnesses. Instead of engaging prey in close combat, they used spears and later arrows. Eventually, they domesticated animals, invented carts, and relied on the labor of others. All of this reduced the evolutionary pressure for heavy bones. Evolution began to favor agility and efficiency over brute endurance. There's also a biological explanation. Bone mass responds to stress. The more physically active someone is, the denser their bones become. As humans shifted to sedentary farming lifestyles, physical activity declined. Less hunting, less running, fewer dangers. Over hundreds of generations, our skeleton adapted. We became taller, but our bones grew thinner. This brought advantages. We're faster, more efficient long-distance movers, but also disadvantages. Higher risk of fractures, osteoporosis, and joint problems. So Homo sapiens became the most fragile, yet most successful species of human to ever exist. One of the key advantages of Homo sapiens wasn't strength or brain size. It was endurance. Surprisingly, our ancestors had more in common with marathon runners than bodybuilders. This may seem counterintuitive. In a prehistoric world filled with predators and danger, what use is long-distance running? The answer lies in hunting. Homo sapiens mastered a technique known as persistence hunting. Instead of taking down prey in a single blow, they would track and chase animals for hours until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. Humans have a unique set of thermoregulation features: sweat glands, long legs, elastic feet, and brain cooling systems. These allowed us to keep moving in hot conditions, while most animals would overheat. Our ancestors could shed excess heat and keep going. Research confirms this. Homo sapiens skeletons show well-developed leg and pelvic muscles, along with spinal structures suited for long treks. We're not the fastest or strongest, but we're hard to shake. Our stamina allowed us to outlast other hominins, reach distant lands, and pursue prey when others gave up after 30 minutes. From this perspective, a marathon isn't just a sport. It's a reminder of our evolutionary heritage. We are descendants of endurance runners who survived not through brute force, but through perseverance. Even today, the human body remembers that strategy, not by domination, but by staying the course. In the world of mammals, nearly all large species are covered in thick fur. Lions, wolves, bears. Fur provides protection from cold, heat, insect bites, scratches, and UV rays. But humans are an exception. Homo sapiens became almost entirely hairless. Why did our species give up such important protection? One leading theory is thermoregulation. As early humans began running long distances under the blazing sun, fur became a disadvantage. Sweating under fur leads to overheating. Sweating on bare skin is more efficient. Humans are among the few mammals that sweat across the entire body. This gave us a major edge. We could keep moving without overheating, while most animals needed to rest. Other theories exist. Fur is a home for parasites. Fleas, lice, and ticks thrive in dense hair. Losing fur may have helped humans reduce infections and disease, especially when living in close social groups. There's also the aquatic ape hypothesis, which suggests our ancestors spent a lot of time in water and lost fur as an adaptation. But this idea is controversial and lacks strong evidence. A more compelling idea is that bare skin enhanced social and sexual communication. It made it easier to see physical signals: blushing, sweating, wounds, sexual arousal. This improved communication and mate selection. In the end, humans became the naked primate, but not entirely. We retained scalp hair to protect against sunburn and overheating. Hair in the armpits and groin also serves a function. It traps scent, acting as a social signal. Humanity didn't just lose fur, it turned skin into a communication tool. If you gather people from across the world, one feature stands out immediately. Skin color varies widely, from nearly black to pale pink, with yellowish, olive, or reddish hues. But our ancestors didn't always look this way. The earliest members of the Homo genus, including early Homo sapiens, had dark skin. Lighter skin is a relatively recent adaptation, and it didn't happen by accident. The key factor is sunlight. The closer to the equator, the more ultraviolet radiation there is. Melanin, the pigment responsible for skin color, protects against UV damage. Dark skin acts like a natural shield. It prevents UV rays from damaging DNA and reduces the risk of skin cancer. This is especially important in hot climates where much of the body is exposed. But there's a trade-off. To synthesize vitamin D, the body needs UV light. In northern latitudes with less sun, dark skin becomes a disadvantage. It blocks too much UV. A lack of vitamin D can lead to weak bones, rickets, and a compromised immune system. So in regions with low sunlight, natural selection began to favor lighter skin. Light skin is a compromise. It offers less protection from the sun, but increases the chance of survival in northern regions. That's why people from Europe, Siberia, and parts of Asia tend to have lighter complexions. Interestingly, the genetic changes that led to lighter skin appeared independently in different populations. Multiple paths to the same solution. Modern humans carry the legacy of these adaptations. Skin color isn't about race. It's about how our ancestors adapted to different environments, like nose shape, height, or skeletal structure. It's part of our species' incredible flexibility. The diversity of skin color isn't a division, it's proof of our evolutionary success. Eyes aren't just organs of sight. They're personal signatures. The color of the iris might seem trivial, but it carries a deep story of migrations, mutations, and adaptations. The first Homo sapiens in Africa all had brown eyes. Blue and green eyes are the result of mutations that occurred after humans left Africa. The most famous mutation linked to blue eyes appeared around 6,000 to 10,000 years ago near the Black Sea. Scientists believe a single person developed a change in the OCA2 gene that reduced melanin production in the iris. The result was pale blue eyes. That mutation has been passed down ever since and is especially common in European populations. Green eyes are another variation. They don't trace back to a single mutation. Instead, they result from a mix of moderate melanin levels and light scattering properties. Green is among the rarest eye colors and is most often seen in people from the Caucasus and Eastern Europe. Gray eyes are another offshoot on the same genetic foundation. But why did light-colored eyes persist? There are several theories. First, lighter eyes may allow more light to pass through, an advantage in regions with less sunlight. Second, sexual selection may play a role. Unusual eye colors could have seemed more attractive and thus been favored in mate choice. Today, eye color is shaped by a complex interplay of genes, More than 10 different regions of DNA contribute to the final shade. It's not just one trait, it's a genetic orchestra. And while eye color now mostly carries aesthetic significance, it still tells a story of our species' journey from the equator to the cloud-covered north. When the mutation in the OCA2 gene first appeared in a single person on the shores of the Black Sea, it was nothing more than a glitch in a biological mechanism, a random disruption of pigmentation. But that single point in the DNA, which initially only changed the color of the eyes, eventually reshaped how humans perceive one another, altering image, status, and symbolism. In the age of hunters and gatherers, unusual traits could do more than attract attention. They could suggest a sense of distinct origin. In small groups where everyone knew each other, rarity stood out immediately, and blue eyes, as a rare visual marker, began to function not just as a feature, but as a signal. I'm different. In a world where being noticed mattered, this became an advantage. With the development of agriculture and the shift to more stable societies, appearance took on new significance. People began to notice and remember physical features, linking them to clans, regions, and ancestry. Blue eyes were drawn into this process of cultural interpretation. In Europe, they became associated with purity of blood, northern nature, and certain ethnic identities. In antiquity, they might have been seen as a sign of spiritual depth. In the Middle Ages, as a mark of witches or sorcerers, and in the 20th century, as a mass media construct and visual ideal in cinema. What began as a minor error in pigmentation evolved into a core element of ethnic myths and ideological narratives. And while, genetically, blue eyes are simply the result of suppressed OCA2 activity, socially they became a symbol of beauty, uniqueness, coldness, or intelligence, depending on the era and context. All blue-eyed people on Earth today truly inherited the same mutation, but along with it came the entire cultural weight humanity has layered onto this trait for thousands of years. Biology became the foundation for stereotypes, preferences, and even discrimination. Eye color isn't just a reflection of light through the iris. It's the biography of a single organism, printed on the faces of millions. It's a coincidence that inspired stories, personal associations, and ideological manipulation. A minor mutation that triggered a cultural chain reaction. And perhaps, right now, it's looking back at you from the mirror. Blue eyes are neither a gift nor a choice. They are a random mutation that changed not just human appearance, but how we see each other. One glitch in DNA became a symbol, a statement, a legacy, and it lives on in millions of faces. In a cramped Indonesian cave, archaeologists uncover the skeleton of a hobbit, barely 1 meter tall. At the same epoch, thousands of kilometers away across the icy steppes of Europe, a burly Neanderthal wanders. Two distant cousins on the same branch of the human family, two radically different survival strategies, and both vanish as soon as Homo sapiens enters the scene. Watch, and you will learn why nature needed 3 different human species, and why only we survived. A little over 1 million years ago, early humans, Homo erectus, spread across an enormous territory. Some ventured into the cold, northern reaches of Eurasia, where over time the sturdy, short-limbed Neanderthals emerged. Others found themselves on remote tropical islands, such as Flores, cut off by sea and volcanoes, where over generations the hobbit, Homo floresiensis, of barely 1 meter stature took shape. These two groups were not grandfather and grandson, but side branches of the same family tree. Like cousins, they lived simultaneously in different corners of the planet and knew almost nothing of each other. Their bodies and ways of life diverged because nature set different challenges. The North demanded heat retention, hence the broad rib cages and short legs of Neanderthals. The island forced an economy of calories, and the Flores folk shrunk to spend less energy. Thus, one ancestral human line produced two entirely different solutions, proving that evolution is not a single ladder upward, but a multitude of paths sideways. It is crucial for us to compare these stories, to understand just how flexibly humans can adapt when faced with new conditions. In October 2003, an Indonesian-Australian expedition was digging a routine test trench in the limestone cave of Liangbua on the west side of Flores Island. At a depth of 4 meters, the shovel struck something fragile. A tiny skull appeared, only 18 centimeters long. At first, the scientists assumed it belonged to a child. However, beside it lay an equally small pelvis, femur, and humerus, and all the bones were already closed, indicating the individual had reached adulthood. The next day, they found a pair of molars, worn flat like those of a 30-year-old hunter. The combination of child-sized stature and adult-worn teeth defied all familiar patterns. To resolve the mystery, the skull was sent to Jakarta for analysis. The internal cranial sutures were completely fused, yet the cranial capacity measured barely 400 cubic centimeters, less than that of a chimpanzee. Even the smallest Homo sapiens, with severe microcephaly, would still show a different vault shape and a pronounced chin. The debate, pathology or new species, soon produced more facts. The layer containing the LB1 skeleton dated to 60,000 years ago. Miniature stone blades and charred bones of pygmy stegodons lay alongside. This proved that the hobbits not only survived until the last ice age, but also hunted in groups, controlled fire, and butchered their prey. Subsequent excavations uncovered 7 more individuals, all the same 1-meterers. Geologists confirmed that periodic volcanic ashfalls from a nearby volcano had sealed the cave, preserving the remains exceptionally well. By the mid-2000s, the scientific consensus had officially recognized Homo floresiensis as a distinct species. Thus, in a warm tropical cave, a major correction surfaced to the familiar notion later means larger brains, forcing anthropologists to reconsider the roles of body size and intelligence in human evolution. Mid-Pleistocene Flores looked nothing like a typical tropical paradise. A long mountain ridge divided the island into a wet north and a dry south. Lava fields crept down its slopes, because every few thousand years, the Ranaka volcano, the island's fiery heart, spewed ash that buried the valleys. Surrounding seas were swift and turbulent. A high saltwater barrier separated the Sunda Shelf from the larger Asian islands, turning Flores into a trap land. Large terrestrial predators never reached here, but ancient survivors did giant Komodo dragons and pygmy stegodons, no taller than ponies. For small warm-blooded creatures, this meant one thing: fewer resources, fewer competitors, and no escape routes. Under these conditions, Homo erectus descendants rapidly shrunk. The long trek from Africa to Java had honed their walking and hunting skills. But on the island, every extra calorie came at too high a price. The island dwarfism rule took effect. The smaller the land area and food base, the more compact the organism in subsequent generations. Flores folk reduced not only leg length, but also brain mass. Yet their foot size and toe length increased for gripping rocky outcrops and fig tree roots. In the rainy season, the hobbits descended to low river terraces, where they built traps of sharp volcanic glass shards to ambush pygmy elephants. And at night, they sheltered under rock overhangs where embers burned for days. Isolation turned the island into a live-in laboratory. Any innovation, be it a new hand-axe shape or butchery technique, spread instantly because villages lay within a day's walk of each other. Over tens of thousands of years, Flores formed a miniature but resilient human population that thrived alongside volcanoes and giant reptiles, exploiting exactly as much land and as many resources as it could sustain, no more, no less. When archaeologists opened the cultural layer around the LB1 skeleton, they expected to find crude choppers, like those of early Homo erectus. Instead, dozens of tiny but neatly flaked blades, no larger than a fingernail, emerged from the soil. They were crafted from volcanic glass and yellow flint by striking thin flakes from a pre-prepared core. Neanderthals in Europe once produced something similar with the Levallois technique, but there the core fit in the palm of the hand, whereas the Flores micro-Levallois operated almost on a jeweler's scale. The size of the tool mirrored the size of its maker. The smaller the body, the less raw material required, and the easier it was to carry a full bag of knives across steep slopes. The blades were hafted into wooden handles to create miniature sickles for butchering carcasses. Scratches on stegodon bones show that the hobbits could strip hide in thin sheets, then extract the brain and bone marrow, the island's most precious resources, in the absence of large herbivores. Charcoal found nearby did not result from a forest fire, but from a maintained hearth. Layers of ash lay in even mats, as though embers had smoldered for weeks. This indicates that the small hunters controlled fire, dried meat, and smoked reptile skins. Perhaps the most remarkable discovery was a series of group trapping trenches. Scientists mapped embankments of stone slabs leading to an abandoned river channel. When pygmy elephants came to drink, they were funneled through a corridor straight into a pit where spear ambushes awaited them. Neanderthals deployed similar drives against bison in icy gorges. Once again, parallel branches converge, differing hunter scales, yet identical logic of cooperative labor. The tools and hunting strategies of Homo floresiensis demonstrate that even a tiny brain, around 400 cubic centimeters, can plan, allocate roles, and preserve technological methods across generations. On an island where every gram of flint was more valuable than gold, the hobbits turned limitation into advantage, proving that evolution prizes precision of adaptation over brute strength or cranial size. When scientists learned that the Flores brain scarcely exceeded 400 cubic centimeters, they initially equated its cognitive abilities with those of a chimpanzee, but the finds in the same layer swiftly contradicted this view. First, along with the skeleton, lay miniature knives and scrapers, flaked along carefully plotted lines. To detach such a flake from flint, one must visualize the intended shape and predict the crack's trajectory, a task no modern ape can accomplish. Second, neat hearths under a meter in diameter were preserved on the cave floor, lined with stones and sprinkled with fine charcoal. These fires were stoked to burn continuously for days, creating a primitive oven for slowly roasting tough stegodon meat or drying roots to make them sweeter and lighter to carry. The ability to regulate temperature marks the next evolutionary step beyond simply keeping a fire alight. Third, among animal bones were fragments of slender projectile points. They snapped just as spears do in a communal drive. The tip chipped upon impact with a rib or joint. This indicates the hobbits hunted in groups, divided roles, and likely issued brief vocal commands. The conclusion is straightforward. A small brain does not impose a low ceiling on possibility. Far more crucial are group organization and the flexible use of one's environment. The Flores folk showed that a compact processor can execute remarkably complex cultural programs when supported by cooperation and even if rudimentary, reliable technology. If we mark a timeline at 60,000, 50,000, and 40,000 years ago, a curious picture emerges. At 50,000, Neanderthal sites still thrive across Europe in the cave of Krapina in Croatia, the Abri de Croix in France, and the eastern slopes of the Caucasus. That same era yields charcoal and bone fragments in the Liangbua site on Flores. Thus, the burly hunters of the north and the tropical pygmies lived in parallel, despite being separated by 6,000 kilometers of ocean and desert. Scientists synchronize clocks with different methods: radiocarbon dating in Europe and thermoluminescence in Southeast Asia, which reads how much light a quartz grain has accumulated since its last heating. Both timers converge on a peak of activity around 46 to 48,000 years ago. By 42,000, their traces begin to fade. There was no direct contact between them. The ocean barred the way. Yet the world was growing smaller. Homo sapiens was just emerging from Africa along an eastern route, and by 45,000, the first of our kind reached Sunda and Sahul. This is the pivotal moment. Modern humans appear in the same ecosystems where ancient cousins still held on. In Europe, we meet the Neanderthal. In the island forests, perhaps eye to eye with a Flores hobbit, though we have yet to find clear evidence of such encounters. This chronology dispels the myth that some died out long ago, others much later. No an evolutionary blink of 10,000 years saw three intelligent human species coexist. Their disappearance is not a mere coincidence, but a shared pattern. Wherever Homo sapiens arrived, both the Neanderthal and the hobbit vanished within a few millennia. It becomes all the more intriguing to discover why our genomes endured, while theirs did not. On Flores, archaeologists have identified not 2, but 9 horizontal strata containing Homo floresiensis remains. The lowest dates to 700,000 years ago, the highest to 50,000 years ago. Between them lie alternating volcanic ash and clay layers, yet tiny bones and microblades appear in every level without notable gaps. This is a rare case of an evolutionary time capsule. Body shape, brain size, even stone tool craftsmanship remain nearly unchanged for hundreds of thousands of years. It indicates that the island's stable niche favored small stature and micro tools over radical innovation. Paleobotanists have recovered charred remains of Lagenaria gourd seeds, canarium nuts, and taro tubers in the hearths. These crops appeared and disappeared, Yet the human menu stayed varied. Stegodon meat, monitor lizard fat, lagoon fish, seasonal forest fruits. Such a diffuse diet supports small but sustainable populations. Estimates based on flake counts suggest 1,000 to 2,000 individuals across the entire island, like a single large village stretching through the valleys. The period between 190,000 and 120,000 years ago is especially telling, when the climate abruptly dried and sea levels dropped by nearly 100 meters. Neanderthal sites in Europe retreated southward. Whole hunting routes disappeared, while forests, by contrast, expanded as new land emerged, and temporary hobbit camps sprang up along coastal terraces. They quickly redrew their range as if water had receded, revealing an extra room. This longevity challenges the stereotype that a small body and brain equate to an evolutionary dead end. On the contrary, the Flores folk turned constraints into a survival formula. Low energy demands, plus a broad array of resources, plus refined yet simple technology. As long as the environment remained an island laboratory of recurring volcanic and monsoon cycles, the Hobbit system ran smoothly, lasting longer than any Neanderthal culture in the north. The last cultural layer, bearing Homo floresiensis bones in Liangbois, dates to 50,000 years ago. Beyond that, silence. What happened to a people who had thrived on the island for 600,000 years? Immediately after the 50,000-year mark, a thick band of gray ash appears in the sediments, the distant plume from the Toba supervolcano, which erupted on the far side of the Indonesian archipelago. The ash winter lasted months, killing half the vegetation, and the remaining fauna retreated northward to wetter regions. These dwarf humans, accustomed to short foraging routes, now had to trek farther and expend more energy than they could sustainably store. Almost simultaneously, archaeologists record the first stone microliths of Homo sapiens in neighboring caves on Sumbawa and Sula Islands. Our species arrived taller, faster, wielding thrown spears, and, crucially, in large family groups accompanied by dingoes and potential zoonoses. For the isolated Flores population, any novel disease could prove lethal. Their immunity, forged in a pure, island crucible, had never encountered these pathogens. Ecology delivered yet another blow. After Toba, rising sea levels drowned the fresh coastal plains, where the hobbits had seasonally gathered shellfish. Habitable land shrank again, and competition for remaining resources intensified. Pygmy stegodons and monitor lizards, once hunted only by hobbits, now faced new rivals who burned forest patches to flush out prey. The small Flores community likely retreated to the island's mountainous heart, but the mosaic of available food niches was exhausted. Geologists seek evidence of landslides and mudflows that may have buried the last villages. Even if some hobbits survived long enough to meet Homo sapiens, their numbers likely never exceeded a few hundred a demographic threshold, beyond which any epidemic, drought, or crop failure becomes catastrophic. Thus, by 40,000 years ago, these diminutive people vanished, leaving only slender blades of stone and a riddle. Did they witness their tall cousins passing? Or did they fade into darkness before the first human canoe reached Flores' shores? The discovery of the hobbits, and shortly before that, the complete mapping of the Neanderthal genome, forced biologists to redraw the familiar scheme. Later in time means larger brains. It turned out that the very idea of linear progress is a convenient myth. On some branches of our family tree, humans grew larger. On others, they became miniature. And, most strikingly, they did both simultaneously. Paleontologists already know examples. Homo naledi, with its small cranial vault, lived in South Africa 250,000 years ago. And another island dwarf, Homo luzonensis, of the Philippines, adds to the pattern. It emerges that brain size offers only the outer limits of memory and abstraction, but does not guarantee success. What matters more is how a species allocates energy and organizes collective work. Geneticists add further nuance. DNA analysis shows up to 3% of our genes came from Neanderthals, and parts of some Asian populations carry Denisovan fragments. This implies our cousins had sufficiently developed language and social norms to form mixed family bonds. Homo floresiensis, however, leaves no such genetic trace. Its bone collagen has been destroyed by the tropical climate, and not a single DNA molecule has yet been recovered. This reminds us that the evolutionary tree is a fragile archive where pages can burn or crumble. Absence of data is not proof of isolation, only a pause in the investigation. The greatest lesson is the concept of the human ecological niche. Half a century ago, scholars believed humans were savanna creatures. Now, we see the Ice Age caves of Europe, active volcanoes of Southeast Asia, and Philippine rainforests all served as human homes. The species did not reshape the world to fit itself. Rather, it molded itself to the world, employing a vast toolkit of biological adaptations, reduced stature, altered limb proportions, and streamlined brains. Thus, the stories of the Flores, hobbit, and its muscular northern cousin shattered the last barrier between normal and exception. In human evolution, normality is diversity. Flores villages still tell tales of a tiny people called Ebu-Gogo, waist-high, covered in hair, moving in chains, and pilfering food straight from cooking pots. Legends say the last of them hid in the karst crevices of Ngoe Ranga and were wiped out by humans only 200 years ago. For scientists, this is more than mere folklore. Liang Bua lies just 40 kilometers from villages where elders still recall the noisy children of the forest, and parts of the lore match archaeological details. Ebu-Gogo wore leaves, spoke poorly, but clearly knew fire. Folklorists record these stories because they may be the final echo of a real neighbor, Homo floresiensis. Proving the connection will require DNA, but the tropical climate has worked against us. Heat and humidity have degraded the bone molecules. Geneticists typically extract collagen from spongy bone tissue, but in the hobbits, it has been replaced by mineral crust. Now, teams from Denmark and Australia are trialing a new method, extracting peptides from tooth enamel. If they can retrieve even a short protein barcode, they will compare it against all known ancient genomes, Neanderthal, Denisovan, Homo erectus, and then we will know precisely how far the hobbit branched off from our common ancestor. For now, the Flores folk occupy an empty node on our family tree. No arrows link them to other species, only a dashed line back to the original erectus. It is like the white spaces on old maps. Terra incognita. Every new technology protein analysis, X-ray imaging, ash spectroscopy fills in the map. But people complete the story. If the Ebu-Gogo legends prove to be traces of real encounters, it means Homo floresiensis lived alongside modern humans, far longer than we thought. And our family tree will sprout new branches once again. Our family tree has proven far broader than once believed. Alongside us lived the burly northern Neanderthals and the miniature floras, hobbits, their divergent paths shrinking to conserve energy or growing robust for cold, demonstrate that evolution prizes flexibility over strength or brain size. By remembering these vanished cousins, we gain a deeper understanding of the fragility of our own success and the value of the diversity that still remains on Earth.